Hey everyone, Laurel here, Minnesota Zone 5A. Just going to talk about container gardening, how I got started, how you can get started, how I create the big display that I have every year on my patio, among other things, and kind of show you my plan for this year. So to start out with, when I first started doing this, I was just in an apartment on a little balcony. I started out just with hand-me-down small pots from family members, planted some inexpensive 4-pack stuff just to kind of learn what my light conditions were. And I went from there. I started collecting bigger pots. Really, to me, they were big, but they were more medium-sized now, like this square one here was one of the first ones that I got. I shopped at Marshall's, Home Goods, TJ Maxx, stores like that. I found a lot of good deals. Garden centers that are local, I've found, have a lot better sales if you're on a budget and looking to start building a collection of pots, especially very early season and very late season. Big box stores, at least the ones near me, I don't find have as good of deals. They're kind of the same prices as garden centers, and they don't really have sales. So check out your local garden centers, especially early and late in the season. But I just started building up slowly. If you're in a situation where, a container like this, you have to leave the soil in and you're worried about it bursting. I didn't have those types of containers to begin with. I just had like the resin ones, like these, a lot better than plastic, especially during the growing season. They hold on to moisture a lot better and they're a lot tougher than plastic. So if you can find those, great. Otherwise, just plastic containers are fine. I would leave the soil in every year and cut, or you could buy, I guess, but I would just cut boughs from like juniper and other evergreens and stick them in the soil over the winter time, just so I didn't have bare pots out on my balcony. And just slowly over time, I've collected, this is more than a decade worth of pots. I got some bigger ones as hand-me-downs as well. I've sold containers, like when I was moving, I sold things I didn't need on Craigslist. Marketplace wasn't a thing at the time, but so there are lots of places to get good deals. You don't have to pay. I know some of these pots are ridiculous, the prices that garden centers are charging. I think this one right here, that was a new one last year, and I think the full price is something like $180 or something for this, 12-inch container. And it's a really nice one. It's labeled frost-free. But this was at Gerton's. They have sidewalk sales in the fall, and I paid $25 for that one. So sometimes you luck out. Some years I don't find those kinds of deals. But you just kind of have to scour places and keep your eyes peeled. Otherwise, Marshall's, TJ Maxx, Home Goods, those are great places to shop too. And so what I do, I group my pots thusly. And yes, they don't look super full at the beginning. They have color and they're pretty. I like to go with neutral containers because then they all kind of work together. I can arrange them in any configuration. I have a lot of like the blues, greens, grays, this little trio of black pots, and I have a fourth one that was clearance at Bachman's a couple of years ago. They were like, the most expensive one was like $19. But if you're kind of going the same color family, it's easy to shift things around and group things together. I also tend to plant a lot of trailing plants. So by the end of the season, the containers are all hidden. Laying them out, I also leave plenty of space, to shift things around as they grow, because sometimes things grow in a way that you don't really anticipate. They get bigger than you expect, or they don't do as well. I am frequently swapping out plants that don't do great for fresh ones, especially when things start to go on clearance in the middle of the season. But you can see there's plenty of space in between these pots, so I can shift them around as things grow, give them enough light, give them enough airflow, and just room to get full size. And I also have room to add a few things in. You can see a lot of these I still have plants that have to go out, but I have planted up my containers so far. most of them. So that's one tip. Don't overstuff your pots. I'm still guilty of doing this because you find plants that you're excited about and you want to try everything. I know I do. But like this is a large pot and I only have 3 plants in it. But all 3 of these plants are going to get very large. Sweet potato vine, it doesn't matter what variety, even the smallest, most compact kind I've tried, which is the River Winter's Medusa sweet potato vine. Those still are extremely vigorous and sometimes need trimming. Lantana, same thing. So know your plants, pay attention to the size on the label. Coleus is another one, very vigorous. So yes, they're not full and huge and lush when I start out. It takes a month or 2 for them to really fill in. I'd say 4 to 6 weeks or so. But you're going to save yourself a lot of money by doing it that way, and your plants are going to be healthier. You don't want plants to get choked out that you want to see. And even if you don't care, if you think, well, may the most vigorous plant win, it's also not good for the more vigorous plants to have that kind of competition. So keep things simple wherever you can. And then know how your pots are positioned too. Like all of these here we open these windows, they're against the wall. So my thriller isn't going to be in the center of the pot, it's going to be towards the back, and I have to be conscientious of the height of things. Something like a grass, this will get tall and go up past the window, but because it's a grass, it's wispy. And it's going to have space for the window to open still without interfering with the grass. I put this canna lily here because it gets humongous. It loves this spot, so I grow it here every year, the Canna Pretoria. And then this coleus vine gets huge too, so that's why I have all of this open space around the bottom for that vine to just trail as much as it wants, and it'll even start intermingling, I hope, with all of these plants that are around here. And I continue to make mistakes to this day still. It's always a learning process. But another thing, color scheme. What I did over on this side is my warm colors. So I started color blocking last summer and really liked how it looked. I love lots of colors, and I love a riot of color as well in my garden. But I found once I started color blocking last year, you still had that big dramatic effect, riot of color, but it was a little bit more organized to the eye. So I grouped warm colors together here, a little bit of mix of variegation in texture, so you have a fine texture and more of a bold texture. Same thing like over here, the sedum's more of a fine texture. You've got the bold texture in the coleus and the geranium. A little bit of variegation with solid over here, so a little bit of mix like that. You don't want to go all in, all solid or all variegated. It's not as pleasing to the eye. This side I'm really excited to see this year because I did all foliage. The canna is going to bloom a little bit, but it's not a real heavy bloomer. It has some red blooms on it. It's mainly going to be dark foliage when it gets big. And this coleus will also bloom, but I usually pinch the blooms off and keep it branching out. So I'm excited to see that. This is all foliage over here. So I've got my warm colors there. Over here I did blues and whites. A little bit of pop of chartreuse. That's another tip. If you can pop something really dark and something really bright in with all the green and all the flowers, it's really going to stand out. Something warm tone, something cool tone as well, like the, something blue or that has kind of that whitish tint, like this licorice vine or the Dichondra Silver Falls. This is Plectranthus guacamole. The gold creeping Jenny works really well. There are all kinds of gold potato vines. Here's the Medusa vine over here, that nice chartreuse color. And then dark foliage too, so a blend of that. Again, I have lots of space over here for things to spread out and trail. You still need to be able to walk through here, which admittedly I usually fail at by the end of summer at maintaining a clear walkway, but we manage. It's so pretty that We don't mind. The other thing, soil. This is obviously a lot of soil in these planters. I do not refresh my soil fully, ever. I always reuse my soil. I do refresh it by topping off with fresh soil, but I don't ever remove all the soil from a container and start over unless it had disease or insect issues. The way I do that, I guess the way that is successful is I am always adding nutrients back in. So most potting soil, at least in the US and North America, is peat moss based. It is extremely difficult to find soil that is not mainly peat moss based, and it is also really expensive to find soil that's not peat moss based. So invest in some decent soil to begin with, and you can mix more expensive stuff like Espoma. Pro Mix is really great. A lot of independent garden centers, bigger ones, at least in my area, they create their own soil mixes that are nice. I really like the Proven Winners variety. On a budget, I'd say Pro Mix is probably the nicest that I've used. So start out with a good soil. It is worth it. I also use a slow-release granular fertilizer in here as I plant, and that gets refreshed every year. So it doesn't matter that the plants use up the nutrients in the soil, because those nutrients were put there by manufacturers of, I guess the companies that bag up and sell the soil. Peat moss is inherently pretty inert. It doesn't contain a whole lot of nutrients on its own. Those are all added with compost, with worm castings. That's another thing I use is worm castings, with fertilizers. So don't worry about that and reusing your soil. All you have to do is put that back in. And then every year, what I do, the larger, heavier pots that I can't, like, this big concrete pot, I can't lift that onto a shelf in the garage. So that just keeps the soil in it. I do clear out the plants and the root balls as much as I can. So some of the soil, is disposed of in the root ball of the plant. I save as much as I can, but obviously not every speck of it comes along or stays in the pot. Big ones like this, I keep the soil in there, and then I top it off with fresh soil. I buy a couple new bags of new soil and some fertilizer. I like Espoma Plant Tone or Garden Tone. Those are the two main ones that I can usually find for a good price every season. And worm castings. I buy the ones from Costco that come out early in the spring, but I see worm castings at all the big box stores and all the garden centers as well, the private garden centers. So it's pretty easy to find that right now. So about a scoop, maybe half a cup of each in the pot. Top off with fresh soil, mix it up, and you're good to go. You're good to plant. That also keeps the soil kind of rotating from year to year. So when I save it, there's always a little bit of fresh soil being topped off, so it's not being completely depleted all the time. Because it is always being renewed with fresh soil a little bit. So a lot of times what happens, they'll come out of storage, the medium-sized pots like this, I empty all the soil out of those and I store it. I save the large soil bags that I buy, and I put the used soil in that or in 5-gallon buckets. I have a bunch of 5-gallon buckets at this point. Store these up on the shelf for winter, and then they come out in the spring, and I'll fill them maybe 3/4. This is a little bit low, but maybe like this with the old used soil. Top off with the new. You can put compost, you can put fertilizer, fresh soil in there, and they're good to plant. So that saves a ton of money and is a lot more environmentally friendly. Do yourself a favor and try it. That being said, if anything has had insect infestation or disease issues, don't save that soil. That's not worth it. You're just going to harbor over those pests or those spores or whatever in that soil, so you want to throw that away along with the diseased plants. I don't clean my pots from year to year. I spray them out to get the loose crud off just with water, but that's about it. But a lot of times in these pots, I've learned, these vigorous plants, I only have 3 plants in here. So that's part of how I do such a big display. I've slowly collected inexpensive pottery on clearance. Things you can do like cannas, you can save the rhizome. I have rhizomes that I've had for more than 10 years now. Same thing with elephant ears. I bought a pack of 3 elephant ears, and every year I have like 10 of them now or more. So you can reuse those. I start a lot of seeds. Obviously, there's a lot you can do with seed starting. Even if you don't have a place to start them indoors, a lot of seeds I wait until it is warm enough to start them outside. It just depends on what's fast growing. So that's a way to start. So I'll kind of walk over. You can kind of see the layout. The pots way towards the back, I don't have as many trailers in them because they'll kind of get lost as the season goes on. Well, I haven't planted this one here, but this big one that these are sitting on, that's not going to have a trailer on it because I'm going to, I need to walk through here at some point, but it doesn't need it because it's going to be behind other plants, and I know this lantana is going to get huge, so there's no point in spending the money and putting a trailer in there. Now, sometimes what I do, I think that at the start, and then it doesn't turn out quite how I envisioned, so I'll wait until, at least in the Twin Cities, it's usually around end of June, beginning of July, that garden centers, particularly the pop-up tents, start clearancing a lot of their annuals because they're kind of winding down their season. They're focusing on the perennials and shrubs at that point. People aren't buying annuals as much, and they don't want to risk just having to throw those away at the end of the season. So sometimes that's when I like to shop for things and kind of make adjustments to my planters and my plan as I go. So we'll go back over the colors. We've got the warm colors here. Blues and whites over here. I talked about that. We've got the pink and white. On this side, I just got my order of caladium bulbs in, so I'll be able to plant all of this up this weekend. Across here, we've got more pink. So we kind of transition, and then the warm colors, I kind of transitioned using yellow. So like we've got this yellow double caliber koa and the, what's that one called? Super Bells Over Easy. Going into the pinks. And again, these planters only have 3. Well, this one has 4. But 3 plants in them. So it's not as big of an expense as you would think. When I first started out, I had small pots and I way overpacked them, but that's how I learned. So the pink transitions into peach, kind of peach coral. I even have a little bit of orange in here. I think this can lean coral, though I love Vermilion Aircuphia. It is just a hummingbird magnet. So I had to plant that. So we've got the peaches. And then in this corner, it's all blue and white again. And now the sun came out. It was behind a cloud for a while, but everything's a little bit washed out. Blue and white. But here we only have 3 plants in this whole pot, but these are going to get big. So I'm going to give them time and room to get big. This cabbage I started from seed. That's an ornamental cabbage. Really easy. Brassicas I find they're really easy to start from seed. So ornamental cabbage, even like edible cabbage, is very decorative. And I have inexpensive things. I did hit that, but things like Dusty Miller, zinnias, marigolds, they're all usually easy to find for inexpensive in most garden centers in 4-packs or 6-packs. And especially when I started out, it was proven winners. They were around, but not like they are today. They weren't this like massive titan in the garden industry. They were just little. Their plants weren't really notable. I would see them sometimes, but it just wasn't a thing. So, and they do have a lot of things that have their label on them, but it is not proprietary to them. Persian shield, that is not proprietary to them. So if there are things that you like the Dichondra Silver Falls, that is not proprietary to Proven Winners. I bought that for years before Proven Winners was selling it with their name on it. I do have another tip for organizing. I like to wait until I collect 90% of my plants before I start planting my containers. because there are always surprises. There are always things I'm not sure how they're going to work. First thing I do in the spring, I take out my pots and I lay them out before I start buying plants. There are some plants that I know I'm going to plant and I have a plan for. Some years I've spent all winter planning in my notebook. I've written out every single container and every single combination. And that's key to not overbuying plants. I'm going to go in the shade here because now it's getting pretty warm in the sun. But that's really important so you don't overbuy, is planning. That helps, just like grocery shopping. If you have a list and you have a plan, you're less likely to impulse buy and overbuy what you don't need. This year, because I've done this setup, this is the third year now, I'll have the same kind of layout for the patio. I kind of have a better idea of what I needed. So I decided, I jot down ideas all year and plants that I want to look for. I have a little notebook journal that I keep with that kind of stuff. But I didn't start planning my containers and laying them out until spring, until I put them out, other than maybe a couple of them. But I set out my containers and then I start making a list. I write down every container and the plants that I'm going to look for to put in them. So careful planning, no impulse buying, although that being said, I always leave space. I know I have to leave room in my plan and in the budget for impulse buys because there are going to be cool things that I find that I want to try, or new plants that I saw and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to find them, but I want to try them now that they're in garden centers. So that's another tip. Leave room for that, both in your budget and in your plan. And it just takes practice. Like I said at the beginning, I had a small little container and I was packing it full of like 4 or 5 things. But I learned a lot about different plants by doing that as well. So it's never a total loss. I also save. So a lot of garden centers like Home Depot or wherever, Menards, I do this. They just dispose of these plastic things all the time. So when I'm shopping, I'll take a flat and put my plants in it and purchase it in that because I do reuse them. Oh, there's a big old bee. But it's really helpful for arranging things too as I'm planning. So I'll start laying the plants out. And a lot of times that's another reason why I like not making a list, because once I see all the plants together, I come up with stuff I didn't think of on my own. Until you see them together, you can't really picture it sometimes. Or you find cool combinations that look great. And then I can fill in the gaps. But save these containers. I pull them out and or these trays rather, and I start arranging my containers in these trays and grouping things together. Like this here, well, not all of it, but part of this tray is a hanging basket that I'm going to do. I have in-ground plantings arranged in trays. I'll lay things out in the pots like this and move them around all the time. So anyway, just a few tips for me, how to do this, how to get started. Leave space for things to get big, to add stuff if you want later on. I'm excited to see these. I love the super Verbena. I've grown a lot of Verbena, including the 4-pack. I think I've grown it every year. I'm not without Verbena and coleus and sweet potato vine. But this is a newer one. I think it was out last year, Violet Ice. And then the whiteout Verbena from Prove Winners that gets massive blooms. And it looks like the Violet Ice gets just as big too. So I'm excited about that. I also use a synthetic, water-soluble fertilizer. Every week or two. I try to do it every week, but with life, it's hard to keep up with that sometimes. So if I miss a week, that's fine. I don't stress about it. And I'm not particular about what brand. It's just synthetic water-soluble. The kind of looks like Blue Flakes. Miracle Grow makes it. That's easy to find. I tend to buy it from garden centers. I found some, I think it's Fertilome brand on super clearance last year that I've been using. But but that mixed in with your watering can once a week. Also for any petunia, and especially calibrachoa, I use chelated iron. I don't have to use the expensive kind, the ADDHA. I can use because I don't have high pH soil or water, so I don't need that style of, I forget what, I use Fertilome brand. It's a liquid. I mix that right in with my water-soluble fertilizer, fill my watering can, and give everything a splash once a week. Give it a good drink with the fertilizer. And then trimming also. Petunias, calibrachoas, if things get leggy, don't be afraid to lop them off, especially with flowers on it. Your plants will thank you. And in a week or two, they'll be even fuller and prettier than they were before. And what else was I going to mention? There was something else that I just thought of. Again, I'm going to go in the shade here. Oh, that's better. It is warm today. It's feeling like summer. Oh, if you're in water, that's what it was. Watering. So I don't have these set up on drip. Maybe someday I'll do that. I'll figure out how to do it. This is our only spigot to the backyard here on the back of the house. I really like these coil hoses. I buy the 50-foot ones where I can find them. A little more expensive, but really worth the price because they coil up and they're so compact. They're really easy to store. And I don't know how I would set up. Maybe I could do a feeder line, get an extra spigot on here and do a feeder line. But make sure you have water handy. And if you're limited to watering cans, that's what I was on my balcony garden for many years. I only had watering cans. So I invested. I had 2 of the biggest watering cans I could get my hands on, which at the time were about 2 gallon, I think, each. So they were good sized watering cans. And I filled them up using the bathtub faucet. That filled them up really fast. But when I had a big collection of pots, they need a lot of water. So it's worth spending the money and searching out really good big watering cans if that is all you have available. Helps if you have a bathtub faucet. They fill up a lot faster. And I highly recommend these coil hoses. This one I have laid out because I was just watering, and I'll do some more watering. But this coils up right in that little pot, so it's easy to tuck away when not needed. Really easy to stretch out. You don't have to reel things in or reel things out. Works on a patio. And maybe someday I'll install a hose reel back here. But again, it's a little bit hard to figure out when your only spigot is way back here on the back of the house. Kind of far away from really the entire yard. So what I do, I connect it. I have a hose that goes through here. And then I have another 4-way splitter down there. So I have this hose coming off. We've got this hose that goes across and all the way to the back. And I have this is a 100-foot hose, and I even have an extension on that in the back of the yard to reach the vegetable garden. So that's something I would like to work on in future years, but for now, this is what I'm doing. And that hose in the back, I can pull around here and reach everything on this side too. But I also have several watering cans that I use. So anyway, kind of rambling on a bit. Hopefully that was helpful or useful information to anybody that's wanting to know how I set this up or how to start container gardening if you want a big display like this. I've learned also, if you're going to have things right next to each other, this is kind of how I had things lined up on my balcony too when I had a balcony. The other reason you don't need as many plants, your trailers you want to plant in the front. So you're going to have trailer. You don't need trailers on the side or the back. These are going to grow together. You're not really going to see the separation between the pots, especially when a bigger filler and thriller fills in. So one more tip, I guess I forgot to mention. So anyway, I'll quit rambling. Hope that was useful or interesting. And hope you have a great day. It's going to be a beautiful weekend, so I'm excited to get some work done. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe. I forgot to mention, I will do a detailed container tour and show some of the recipes and the plants that I planted. Once I get everything planted. At this point, I'm kind of in a rush to get everything in, but I will do a tour in the future so you can know all the specific plants I planted, and I'll keep updates so you can see how they perform. Bye!